Welcome, everyone, to this deep dive into a very challenging topic. We're talking about hyper-normalization, the idea that even though our systems are crumbling, we somehow keep pretending that everything's normal.
Yep, it's such an intense yet oddly relatable concept. So, how do you see this starting off, particularly with that video by Ashley Bez?
Right? It starts with Ashley Bez posting this video where she's, trying to describe a heavy mood, almost like an air of dread. And then Rahaf Harfoush, that digital anthropologist, immediately jumps in saying, "Welcome to the hypernormalization club."
Yep.
It's a sharp observation of how we're living now.
Oh, for sure. And it's wild how that single video, within just 48 hours, got millions of views. People everywhere are feeling this disconnect.
Exactly. So, the term itself, hypernormalization, was originally coined by Alexei Yurchak to describe life in Soviet Russia. It captures the sense of knowing that everything's falling apart at the seams, but still carrying on as if nothing's wrong. It's almost like a surreal blend of apathy and disquiet.
Right? On one hand, we see broken institutions and failing systems, and on the other, people just continue with their lives, even though deep down there's this heavy sense of dread.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating is how this concept extends beyond just politics. Think about scrolling through your feed and seeing a quiz like, "What Pop-Tart are you?" right after an article about hunger or genocide. It's that juxtaposition of dire issues with mundane distractions. It really highlights the disconnect between our grim reality and the everyday trivialities we willingly engage in.
So, you're saying that hypernormalization is this constant state of cognitive dissonance, being aware of systemic failure, yet continuing life as usual.
Yes, exactly. And this ties into, a broader political anxiety. For instance, the political landscape in the US is super fractious these days. We see actions like dismantling checks and balances with figures like Trump, and even billionaires like Elon Musk shifting power structures. It's like a multi-layered crisis where both the personal and the political are under siege.
And that really seeps into everyday life. Would you say that this phenomenon makes people feel extremely isolated, even when they're out and about?
Definitely. Harfoush created her video partly to reassure people, to let them know they're not alone in feeling this weird disconnect. Naming the feeling as hypernormalization gives a kind of psychological relief, like, hey, it's not just you, this is real.
For sure. It's almost therapeutic. Framing the shared experience helps people realize they're not just isolated in their anxiety or, descending into panic.
Exactly. And there's also that feeling of being utterly paralyzed, almost like sleep paralysis. Mariel Gragusky compared it to a waking nightmare where you're so aware of the horror that you basically can't move. This isn't just abstract theory, it's real, embodied fear.
I get that, but don't you think sometimes this comparison to sleep paralysis might exaggerate personal inertia? Not everyone might experience it as something so, all-consuming.
Fair point. Not everyone's reaction is identical. Some folks channel that anxiety into action, while others just freeze. The spectrum is wide, from denial and isolation to outright protest and activism.
That makes sense. Speaking of protest and activism, how do you think this state of hypernormalization influences the political response we've seen recently?
Well, there's a real call for moral clarity and mobilization in the face of institutional decay. Progressive voices like Betsy Hartman argue that engaging politically, even in small ways, can shatter this frozen state of inaction. Activism becomes a way to counteract the overwhelm.
Right, but is it enough? I mean, while protests are stirring, there's also this massive digital distraction. can digital engagement really translate to meaningful real-world change?
That's a great point. There's this inherent risk of surrogating deep political involvement with digital entertainment or superficial online activism. However, many experts assert and even cite that just 3.5% of the population mobilizing through peaceful protest has the
Yep.
potential to rein in authoritarian tendencies. It's a fascinating statistic that really emphasizes collective action.
Sure, collective action is key, but like you mentioned, the digital space can dilute that commitment. It's a double-edged sword.
Right? And then there's the element of art and literature in this conversation. Ursula Le Guin's observation reminds us that we live in capitalism, but also that any human power can be resisted and changed. Art in its many forms becomes a catalyst for change, a way to awaken collective consciousness.
That's a really empowering message. It suggests that while systems may be crumbling, they're not unchangeable. We're participants in this process.
Exactly. It all circles back to the fact that hyper-normalization is this persistent dissonance, being aware of systemic dysfunction and yet being trapped in a cycle of routine. And when we name it, it opens up a space for action.
So in essence, hypernormalization is about living with the constant clash between a broken system and the urge to carry on as if nothing is wrong.
Yes, and that clash is what creates the urgency. It's like being in a movie where you know the set is crumbling, but the script insists on a happy ending. You feel that underlying tension, that disquiet, sometimes even on a bodily level.
It's a kind of cognitive dissonance where, on one hand, you're aware of the malfunctioning system, and on the other, you're forced to live your everyday life.
Right? And some scholars, like Adam Curtis in his documentary, point out that governments may even intentionally foster this state of confusion and dread as a method of control. It's like keeping us in a constant state of vulnerability so that we're too paralyzed to resist.
That's a stark idea, using our own anxiety against us. So, turning that around. Can this overwhelming fear be transformed into, say, a driving force for change?
Absolutely, I think it can. When we acknowledge that our fear is real but also a trap, we might start channeling it into political engagement and community solidarity. When people talk to each other, when communities both online and offline come together, that energy can spark real change.
Yep, sure. But I worry that digital communities often offer temporary relief rather than long-term solutions. How do we ensure that online engagement translates to offline action?
That's a valid concern. It's like having a chat on social media can feel validating, but it's no substitute for, say, discussing policies with your neighbor on your block. The key is blending digital connectivity with tangible real-world initiatives like protests, community meetings, and local activism.
It seems then that while hypernormalization encapsulates the dissonance of our times, it also offers a lens to transform that inaction into something more powerful, provided we can bridge the gap between virtual support and actual mobilization.
Exactly. Although I do think we have to be careful. While naming and exploring hypernormalization gives us clarity, it also risks making us complacent, accepting dysfunction as the new norm. We need to make sure that our recognition of the problem fuels our action instead of becoming just another excuse for inaction.
Yep, I see that. And that's where that push for international solidarity comes in, right? Learning from resistance efforts worldwide, in places like Turkey, Hungary, India, can give us models for rebuilding and challenging the status quo.
Exactly. It's about building a broader vision for society that isn't just about coping with dysfunction, but actively resisting it. And that resistance, whether through protest, community action, or creative art forms, can change the narrative.
In the end, it's a call to wake up and recognize that the world as we know it is a choice. And if we have the power to choose, we can choose to, build a fairer, more sustainable system rather than just enduring the current chaos.
Absolutely. It's about realizing that despite all the overwhelming fear and dysfunction, we still hold the tools, our voices, our protests, our art to shape a better future. We need to act now, together, to break free from this hyper-normalized state.
Right on. Thanks for such a insightful discussion. It definitely gives us a lot to ponder about how we live our daily lives and what actions we can take.
Thank you as well. Remember, recognizing the problem is the first step toward change. Let's all keep this conversation going and work together for a better tomorrow.